Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today let's learn about post-structuralism. Post-structuralism emerged in the late 1960s, particularly around 1966-1967. Post-structuralism is a major intellectual movement that emerged in the mid-20th century, particularly in France, as a critical response to structuralism. It has had a profound impacts on philosophy, literary theory, cultural studies, linguistics, sociology, history, and psychoanalysis. Post-structuralism critiques the idea of stable structures that determine meaning and identity, proposing instead that meanings are always fluid, differ, and contingent upon cultural, historical, and linguistic contexts. Origins of post-structuralism. Historical background. Post-structuralism arose in the 1960s and 1970s, particularly in France, in a period of political unrest. For example, the May 1968 student revolt and a general distrust in grand narratives and authority. Foundational reaction. It developed as a response to structuralism, which emphasized the deep structures in language, society, and culture. Structuralists like Saussure, Lévi-Strauss, and Lacan sought universal rules that governed meaning. Post-structuralists criticized this rigidity and instead emphasized the instability, multiplicity, and a contradiction in meaning and identity. Influences. Ferdinand de Saussure. The arbitrariness of the sign led to the idea that language is unstable. Heidegger and Nietzsche, critics of metaphysics, truth, and subjectivity, influenced the post-structuralist philosophy. Freud and Lacan. Psychoanalytic theories inspired ideas about the fragmented self and unconscious structures of meaning. Development and key ideas. Post-structuralism is not a single unified theory, but a collection of approaches. The core ideas include the instability of meaning. Language does not have fixed meaning. Meanings shift depending on usage and context. Deconstruction. Coined by Jacques Derrida, it is the method of unpacking binary oppositions like a speech writing, male-female, light-dark, to reveal internal contradictions in texts and ideologies. The death of the author. Roland Barthes argued that meaning does not originate from the author, but from the interplay of language and the reader's interpretation. Power and discourse. Michael Foucault focused on how discourse language systems are tied to power, shaping knowledge, identity, and truth in a specific historical context. Multiplicity of truths. There is no single universal truth. Instead, truth is constructed, partial, and contextual. Intertextuality. Introduced by Julia Kristeva, it suggests that all texts are interwoven with other texts. Meaning is generated through relationships among texts. Subjectivity as constructed. The self is not a coherent, autonomous entity, but a fragmented and a constructed identity shaped by language and discourse. Social and political context. Post-structuralism emerged in a time of crisis in authority with the post-war skepticism toward Enlightenment values, colonialism, patriarchy, and state power. It gave intellectual voice to marginalized perspectives, aligning with the feminist, post-colonial, queer, and decolonial critiques. It influenced the rise of identity politics, critical theory, and anti-foundational ethics. Importance of post-structuralism in language and literature. In language, post-structuralism revolutionized linguistics by suggesting that language does not mirror reality, but rather constructs it. Derrida's difference, that is, difference plus deferral, emphasized how meaning is always postponed in a chain of signifiers. Literary criticism. It moved away from trying to find the author's intention or a text's true meaning toward analyzing texts as fields of competing meanings. It made a criticism more dynamic, political, and interpretive. New forms of reading. Deconstructive reading by Derrida to expose the instability in text. Reader response theory influenced by Roland Barthes, the reader becomes the co-creator of meaning. Post-colonial reading inspired by Foucault's discourse analysis. Major thinkers and their works. Jacques Derrida's Of Grammatology, Writing and a Difference. Margins of Philosophy. Key contributions include deconstruction, deference, critique of logocentrism. Michel Foucault, An Archaeology of Knowledge. Discipline and Punish, The History of Sexuality. His key contributions include Power, Knowledge, Discourse, Genealogy, Subjectivity. Roland Barthes' key works include, as by said, The Pleasure of the Text, Death of the Author. Contributions include reader-centered criticism, intertextuality, semiotics. Julia Kristeva works include Desire in Language, Powers of Horror. Contributions include intertextuality, abjection, psychoanalysis, feminism. Jean Baudrillard works include Simulacra and Simulation, The Gulf War Did Not Take Place. His contributions include Hyperreality, Simulation, Critique of Postmodern Media. Ram Francois Leiter. His work include The Postmodern Condition. Contributions include Critique of Grand Narratives, Knowledge as Performativity. Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari. Work include Anti-Oedipus, A Thousand Platters. Contributions include Rhizomatic Thought, Schizophrenia as Social Metaphor. Now let's analyze post-structuralism's relation to other movements. Structuralism. Post-structuralism critiques its assumption of universal structures. Postmodernism is closely allied. Both reject universals and embrace pluralism. Existentialism shared concerns for subjectivity, but post-structuralism questions even the stability of the self. Marxism. Post-structuralism critiques grand narratives. Some strands merge with cultural Marxism. Feminism. Many post-structuralist feminists like Julia Kristeva, Judith Butler use it to critique gender binaries. Psychoanalysis. Heavily influenced by Lacan's linguistic turn and a Freudian theory. Now let's analyze the legacy and relevance of post-structuralism today. In academia, post-structuralism reshaped the humanities and social sciences, influencing departments of literature, cultural studies, sociology, philosophy, gender studies, and anthropology. In politics, inspired critics of institutions, colonialism, nationalism, patriarchy, and capitalism. In a contemporary theory, key to developments in post-colonialism, for example, Gayatri Spivak, queer theory, for example, Judith Butler, and discourse analysis. Now let's do a comparison of post-structuralism with structuralism. The view of language. Structuralism believes stable system of science. Post-structuralism believes in unstable, shifting meanings. Authorial intent is important in structuralism, and in post-structuralism it is irrelevant. For example, death of the author. Then a truth in structuralism, it is objective, discoverable. In post-structuralism, truth is constructed, multiple, contextual. Interpretation in structuralism is one correct reading. In post-structuralism, interpretation, many possible readings. Structure in structuralism is deep universal patterns. In post-structuralism, no fixed structure, deconstruction. Subject in structuralism is centered, rational. In post-structuralism, subject is decentered, fragmented. Discourse in structuralism is neutral system. Discourse in post-structuralism is embedded in power ideology. Now let's go to the examples of post-structuralist texts in a literary theory. Jacques Derrida's Of Grammatology, 1967. Michael Foucault's Discipline and Punish, 1975. Roland Barthes' S by Z, 1970. Jean Baudrillard, Simulacra and Simulation, 1981. Julia Kristeva, Desire in Language, 1980. Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, 1,000 Plateaus, 1980. Jean-Francois Lyotard, The Postmodern Condition, 1979.